interaction. Meeting is being recorded. That's good. So I did have a little bit of interaction with the topic of technology, and out of that interest in my dissertation related to the topic of higher education, I started to read more on technology and what it could mean for us as Christians. And I'm certainly no expert, but now I'm interested to the point that I started to write a book on it. So I've got a manuscript, and we'll hear more about that in a moment. And so, yeah, I'm married to Annalie. Many of you know Annalie because she's ordained to the Church of the Brethren, and we both moved out of California 2 months ago. We live in Pompano Beach, Florida now, and we're very glad that we still have these opportunities to stay connected with you by Zoom. Yeah, so with that, what will be my topic? How will I structure my topic here? I've got the overview, so I'll start by talking about the historical context of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and then I'll talk about technologies of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and my third point is implications of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So you can tell I'm seminary trained. I got my 3 points here, similarly like what many of us do when we have a sermon. So we'll see how it goes. Starting with the historical aspect of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, what we see here on this picture is a steam engine, early steam engine, as it was improved by Isaac Watts in England in the 18th century. And so usually when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, that is what we have in mind, right? That some authors in many books would just use the term Industrial Revolution for what happened in the 18th century. But then some others say that it's the first Industrial Revolution because what happened there was mostly powered by the steam engine. But later in the 19th century, they would say electricity came, right? And electricity was another major milestone. And so they would call that the Second Industrial Revolution. And then they would say that in the 20th century, in our time, especially after World War II, we had a third industrial revolution because that's when the internet, when the computer came along, and later in the 1990s, also the internet became prominent. And so that leads us to this fourth point now, where some people are saying, well, what we're seeing now, we're just at the cusp of another major shift in how things are going to change. And that is the fourth industrial revolution, what we will be experiencing now in the 21st century. And that fourth industrial revolution is powered by a combination of technologies, but the most influential among them is possibly AI, artificial intelligence. So I know this can be a lot if this is the first time that maybe you've heard about the fourth industrial revolution. So I have another slide that talks about the same idea with a chart. So here you can see that we've got a progression from left to right, where we have timeline. And then from the bottom to the top, we have a progression where it goes up because the complexity of the technology and of how it influences society and the production processes increases. So same idea here, right? We start on the left corner, on the lower end with the first industrial revolution in the 18th century, where for the first time in human history, we had steam-based machines, right? That could be used in factories. And later, of course, the train came along with steam engines and revolutionized transportation and all that. And then later on, we have the second industrial revolution when electricity came, and we also have energy-based mass production, right? That's the idea of the conveyor belts, you know, what Henry Ford did, right? The way Henry Ford started to produce the Model T, the kind of mass production, that would be an example of the second industrial revolution. And then in the third industrial revolution, that is the late 20th century, right? We have computer and internet-based knowledge. So you see there's a transition here from a focus on physical work, like machines that can do physical work, like a steam engine or a conveyor belt, towards machines that can do some kind of intellectual work or information processing. And that's really also what's very much characterizing the fourth industrial revolution, or what is here called the second information revolution, because now we not only have computers, we not only have the internet, but the idea is that all this information that is available in computers and the internet is combined with artificial intelligence, right? So now we have machines that can also perform cognitive tasks. And again, I know that that is just a very short overview of the fourth industrial revolution. If you want to dive deeper into that, I'm going to point you to a website, which would be from the World Economic Forum. And the website, as you can see up there on the slide, is www.we, as in we, as in worldeconomicforum.org. And then they have different sections on their website, but one of them you can get to the fourth industrial revolution and this little video clip here, the fourth industrial revolution at a glance. But yeah, we won't be watching that video. Instead, I want to read the introduction, the first few paragraphs from my manuscript of the book that I started to write, which also points to the World Economic Forum. So there I write, beginning in 1974, politicians, entrepreneurs and celebrities have conducted an annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, in order to discuss the future trajectory of the world economy and other global issues. This exclusive and influential gathering was initiated by Klaus Schwab, a professor of business policy, who became the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. During the 2015 annual meeting, Davos, Schwab highlighted the significance of an epochal development, sometimes described as the fourth industrial revolution. This term goes back to the year 2011, when the German federal government began to promote the concept of Industry 4.0 as the next milestone in the future of manufacturing. However, it was Schwab who popularized the term and made it known to a wider audience, particularly through his landmark book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, which he published in 2016. As Schwab emphasizes, the fourth industrial revolution is not only changing the technological and economic realities of our time, it changes us as human beings. This is because in the fourth industrial revolution, a large number of innovative technologies converge, creating a new environment that is about to radically transform the way people live and work. And through advances in gene editing, may even change the very fabric of human beings. These powerful technological innovations that, taken together, will shape the age of the fourth industrial revolution include artificial intelligence, AI, advanced robotics, blockchain technologies, quantum computing, biotechnology, genomics, virtual reality, VR, nanotechnology, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, the Internet of Things, also known as IoT, space technologies, materials science, geoengineering, and energy storage. This is quite an impressive list of technologies, each with their own challenges and opportunities. As the futurist and best-selling author Bernhard Marr recognizes, many of these technologies by themselves would have a massive impact on business and society, but collectively the change will be beyond what many of us can imagine today. In this book, obviously today it's a presentation, but I'm writing this for a book. In this book, I introduce some of these technologies, explaining what the current state of development is and how these innovations may impact humanity in the future. This is then followed by an evaluation from a theological point of view. My goal is to make the discussion about these topics accessible to everyday people, to those of us who are not part of the elites meeting in Davos every year. In particular, writing from the perspective of a follower of Jesus, I want us as Christians to be aware of these developments, considering that the fourth industrial revolution not only has far-reaching economic, social, and political consequences, but important ethical implications as well. To be missional, the church needs to be relevant. And in order to be relevant in the 21st century, Christians need to engage with the topic of technology in knowledgeable and applicable ways. A considerable number of Christian authors has already addressed issues related to technology, including more recent developments like social media, AI, and transhumanism. The present volume, however, is unique in that it introduces a sample of current trends within the framework of the fourth industrial revolution, addressing a variety of questions in order to spark a conversation about these important topics within the body of Christ. So with that, I'm going back to my PowerPoint, and I want to review again some of these technologies that I just mentioned in this Word document that I read from, because the technologies are really driving. I think for the other change that's coming. So I think for us as Christians, we do want to think primarily maybe about social change or economic change or ethical questions, but the technologies are really the things that are provoking these new questions. So the technologies that are important in the context of the fourth industrial revolution are artificial intelligence, advanced robotics, the Internet of Things, virtual reality, biotechnology, blockchain technologies, right? The most prominent example at the moment is Bitcoin, right? Which is a digital currency. Nanotechnology, quantum computing. There were, maybe some of you have read in recent days, there were some news headlines also coming from China. Apparently China has made progress with new generations of quantum computers that still make some mistakes. So there's still some things to be figured out, but apparently these computers can be many thousand or maybe even millions of times more powerful than the current computers that we have in terms of calculation power. 3D printing, energy storage, geoengineering. And so geoengineering, some of the ideas have to do with climate change and global warming, right? So maybe technologies like carbon capture. Some people are also thinking about whether we can change the chemical structure in the atmosphere and then cause rainfalls over areas that, maybe are usually very dry. Even if somebody might think that geoengineering may not be necessary or may not be a good idea to try here on Earth, but if you are interested in inhabiting another planet, such as going to Mars, right, then you not only need space technologies, which is also something that's in the headlines a lot, right, with billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk with SpaceX having his own space program. Then the idea is once you use those space technologies to reach Mars, then probably you'll have to change things on Mars if you really want humans to be able to live there long term. So that's a little bit of an overview of the different technologies that are really reshaping the way we live and work even today, and probably even more so in 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. Having said that, this is now a time where you may want to unmute yourself and maybe also use the chat function if you want to share a thought or ask a question. And I'm just going to stop sharing so I can see the chat in case somebody wants to use the chat. So yeah, if you want to use audio, please unmute yourself. And if you want to use the chat, I'm going to read the question in the chat.
Well, thank you, Daniel. This has been amazing, like drinking out of a fire hydrant. That's fine. I mean, I'd love to sit down and talk with you for a few hours. So many things, several of these involve, I think, significant danger. I'm not trying to be reactionary, but when you talk about, not you, but when you bring up such topics as gene editing, that is very troubling to me. Could you also define transhumanism?
Yeah, so I mean, for the gene editing question, so later for our discussion time, that could be one of the questions that maybe one group, if we do breakout rooms, could focus on. And again, I'm sure it's certainly no expert on bioengineering or gene editing. Each of these topics would need their own expert, right, to really go deep. But yeah, I think we can start the conversation. And yes, transhumanism is a way of looking at the world that is not directly about the fourth industrial revolution, but it's often related because it's also connected to advanced technology. So transhumanism is the idea. It's kind of like a secular philosophy or a new expression of religion, you could say, to some extent, because transhumanists seek immortality, right? But not the way that we Christians seek immortality.
Okay, so it's not a combination of the robotic and the human like we see with Iron Man. Is that some other kind of word that where you've combined a human being but also some robotic or other non-human aspects in the same person. Does that have
Yes,
another word?
it can be, yeah. So some transhumanists, they primarily seeking an augmented human being.
That's
right?
it. That's it. Augmented, right?
That you
And
know.
I know other people have questions. I just have one last one.
Mhm.
Do you have a publisher yet for your manuscript?
I've talked to Wipf and Stock.
Yay, that's who I was going to suggest.
Oh, you were going to suggest? Okay,
I
great.
just
Thank
published.
You. That sounds like a confirmation.
And shameless plug. Just the past couple of weeks, they published my history mission biography, and that's what my Tuesday night thing is on. But I'll try to be quiet for a while if other people have questions.
Right, and I see that Norma also said define transhumanism, please. So
I think it's very important what you're doing. It's a big bite for you to chew, but I'm grateful that you are taking this challenge on.
Thank you.
Daniel, I'm Felton Daniels, and I'm enormously ignorant about anything technology. I am pretty good at using the telephone, but the computer confuses me. So, but I do have a question about the stuff you're talking about in relation to the idea of our church today. It seems like, especially with the brethren, church is very much relational.
Right.
And if we have computers that think like we do and do everything for us, and maybe are we going to need church? Are we going to need each other? How far does this kind of technology carry us in terms of a theological aspect?
Right. And just, because there was another question in the chat about define transhumanism. So I'm just replying with a quote here from the Britannica, just that I Googled. Transhumanism is a social and philosophical movement devoted to promoting the research and development of robust human enhancement technologies. So yeah, some transhumanists seek enhancement, that they would, maybe have, a stronger body or better eyesight or something like that, or better memory. And some of them in a more radical stage seek immortality, in that they think that the human brain could be uploaded to the internet, right? That the human brain is just seen as a combination of electronic impulses that could be copied on the computer, and then they could be uploaded, and then that human being's consciousness in some ways could continue to exist even when their body dies. But yes, back to your question. And again, I'm hearing some background noise from somebody who hasn't muted themselves. So if they can do that, that would be great. But yeah, I think the relational aspect that we just heard about is both a challenge and an opportunity for us as a church, or also for the Church of the Brethren. In that, yeah, I do think we are moving towards a stage where people will need less human interaction if they choose so. Again, we are already seeing that, right, with the technologies we have today, whether that's Zoom or Uber Eats. Nowadays, you don't even have to leave the house. Like, you can survive in your own home and get food and get social interaction and everything through the apps that you're using on your phone. And I think, through the arrival of virtual reality, for some people, that will become an even greater temptation, to say, well, I don't need to travel to Egypt to explore the pyramids. I can explore the pyramids in my virtual reality program at home, or anything else that I'm interested in. And so I think what we're going to see as the church is like a both and. On the one hand, I think as churches we will have to embrace many of the technologies that are available to us. Just like now we are using Zoom like everybody else, and almost every church that I know of, including Churches of the Brethren, have a website, for example, right? 40 years ago, none of our churches had a website. Now it's totally normal. So I think that will also happen with some of the other technologies, that on the one hand, we will be using them. On the other hand, we also want to offer an alternative to society, right? And say, well, as people become more isolated, for example, we as the church, we want to be prophetically different and call people to community and real interaction with physical touch, with things like the washing of feet and the baptism in water and the eating of the bread and the wine, those physical elements that Jesus taught us. I think that will also become something that can bring comfort to people who in a technology-driven environment might become mentally unstable, because they feel like everything is virtual, everything is artificial, and they lose the grounding of what it means to be a human being.
Building on Felton's question, perhaps another question I had. Will you, in your manuscript and book, be addressing artificial intelligence to the point of self-awareness and all the implications that could be? Do you know of the book recently published, co-authored by someone who you almost think he's downloaded his brain already, Henry Kissinger? I mean, he really, I heard him interviewed the other day, and while he speaks very slowly and with an accent, he is on the horizon of artificial intelligence. So do you have any thoughts on AI self-awareness?
Yeah, I've read some things about it, and I think a lot of people who are looking into it, they acknowledge to this day we don't even know what consciousness is or self-awareness is, and a lot of people who are interested in AI feel like that it's a little bit of a side discussion. They would emphasize that it doesn't really matter whether AI reaches self-awareness or self-consciousness or not. What we need to face, at least in the next 10, 20, 30 years, is that AI will become better at many tasks than what humans can perform. It's kind of like comparing a horse with a car. Obviously, a horse has more self-awareness and more consciousness than a car, right? Like less consciousness than we human beings, less emotions, but less complex emotions, but certainly more complex emotions than a car. And yet, we don't use horses anymore for transportation, right? We use cars for transportation because cars do a better job. They are faster than horses. So many in the AI community, they are less interested in those philosophical questions that are about self-awareness. But some people are, like Noah Harari, for example, the Israeli historian who wrote Homo Deus. Some people are getting more in that direction where AI becomes like this all-powerful, maybe even self-conscious entity that takes over the world. In my book, I'm more interested in what's probably going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years. And it doesn't look like AI will gain consciousness in the next 10, 20 years, but they will certainly get better at many tasks. With that, I'm going to switch to my PowerPoint again. So thank you for hanging in there with me for these questions. And I know there would be many more, but just to move on to something else, zooming in on the topic of AI, I just want to emphasize this point again, that what makes the fourth industrial revolution so special is that, like I said, we have this phenomenon that now we have machines that can compete with us on the cognitive level, which is different from what we've experienced the last 200 years or maybe even longer in human history, where humans invented tools like the windmill or something like that help them with physical tasks. And again, using again the analogy of the animal kingdom, human beings, even before they invented machines, they were aware that there are animals that are stronger than them, right? That's why we use in Asia, for example, in Africa, use elephants to transport things, or maybe to pull down trees, or in many parts of the world we use oxen or some kind of buffalo to pull the plow, right, to work in our fields, because we realize that animals have more physical, many animals or some animals have more physical strength than humans. But it was always clear that humans are vastly superior to any animal in terms of their intellectual capacity. Similar with machines, even with all the sophisticated machines that were invented in the last 200 years, you know, whether it's the train or the car or the computer, it was clear that human beings are still more intelligent than machines. But that's beginning to change. So for example, when you look at this man here, Marion Tinsley, apparently who lived from 1927 to 1995, apparently he is considered the greatest checkers player of all time. So, right, so the area of games is a good area to see how AI has evolved. However, in 1994, after winning all kind of tournaments over many, many years against all kind of human players, he played against the computer program Chinook, 6 games, and they were all draws, right? So here we don't have a victory of AI over a human in a game, but it's a draw, right? So no human being was able to beat Marion, or sometimes, of course, they would, but generally Marion would win. But now he's faced with this computer program where he can only achieve a draw. Now things became more dramatic with chess because, of course, chess is more complex than checkers. So in 1997, we have Garry Kasparov, who was a chess grandmaster at that time, and was still considered one of the greatest chess players of all times. And he played against a computer program that IBM had developed called Deep Blue. And so here, that gentleman on the right here in the black suit, he's not really thinking about the moves, right? He's just moving the figures according to what the computer is telling him. And Garry Kasparov, of course, is using the human brain to try to compete in chess, but in the end, he lost against Deep Blue. And so that's considered a major milestone in AI, as is the following incident here, where we have AlphaGo, a program developed by Google. And in 2016, AlphaGo defeated the Korean Go master Lee Sedol. There's a great documentary about that. I think you can also find it on YouTube. So if you want to look for that and watch it, it's very exciting. And the important thing here is that in Go, you have even more possibilities than in chess, right? Because in chess, you have 8x8 fields, 64 fields in total, where you can place your figures. But in Go, you have more than that. And again, same with chess. For many years, people thought, okay, you know, machines or computers are becoming more intelligent. You know, we've all known the computer programs from the early days that played chess that maybe could defeat a player like you and me, right? But a lot of people thought that a computer program would never be able to defeat a grandmaster, like a world champion in this kind of discipline, because the idea was that chess or Go, besides knowing the rules and developing tactics, that you also need things like strategic thinking, and you need intuition, and you need creativity to be a good player. And it was thought that a computer would never be able to match human beings in that area. Now we know that, yes, computers may not be self-conscious, of course. They may not be creative in the way that we human beings understand creativity, and yet they can beat the best of us at any game that requires strategic thinking, whether that's chess or Go. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, that's fine. A computer can play chess, a computer can play the Asian game Go, but you know, it's still, although there are many possibilities, but it's still a very controlled environment, right? Which is different from traffic, right? Traffic is much more complex than even chess or Go. So the question is, you know, how is AI doing in a more complex environment, more unpredictable environment, where not everybody plays by the rules, right? In traffic. So we know the rules in traffic, right? Cars are supposed to go 65 miles an hour, for example, in the freeway, but some don't. Some go over that, and some are much slower. And of course, pedestrians sometimes jump in the middle of the street. And so we are not there yet, right? That AI could power the software for an autonomous car or a self-driving car, but we are getting there pretty fast, it seems, at least for some environments, such as driving on the freeway. Maybe some of you have a very new car that already has some self-driving features, and that's not yet complete self-driving, but many people think that in 10, 20 years from now, we will be at the point where autonomous cars will be able to handle most traffic situations. And then, of course, there's the whole area of medicine, right? That these new technologies of the fourth industrial revolution will help us to find new cures. Some of that will be driven by AI, right? Simply by the amount of data that AI can process that a human doctor would never be able to process. So that could bring some breakthroughs. Other breakthroughs could come through nanotechnologies that, with a very, very tiny world of manufacturing, where maybe at some point we could build mini robots that are so small that they can go into the blood vein of human beings and repair damaged cells or organs within a human being and things like that. And then, of course, some people, like I've also mentioned before, with space technologies have the vision, like Elon Musk has expressed it, that humans could become a multi-planetary species, right? That maybe Earth is not the only place where we could make our home, but through advanced technologies, other planets could become a home as well. And I'm seeing there are comments on the chat, and I'll come back to that in a second. But for now, let me point out that all these technologies have certain implications, right? This is not only about technology, it's also about what this means for society. So implications of the fourth industrial revolution is at the basic level, manufacturing will change, right? That is where much of the fourth industrial revolution has started. If you remember in the first thing that I read, although Klaus Schwab popularized this term, the fourth industrial revolution, but the concept of industry 4.0 started in Germany a few years before that. And, Germany is big on manufacturing. So that is a major area where things will change. And then from there, things will also change in the world of work. And because jobs will change, education will have to change in order to prepare people for those kind of jobs. And of course, entertainment, the way we spend our free time, will also change. And maybe even we as human beings will change, right? Through genetic engineering or through some kind of enhancement. And again, I understand that some of us may not be comfortable with that, but for example, I have bad eyesight, as have both my father and my mother and my sisters, and I'm wearing contact lenses now, right? So, in a way, a contact lens, more so than glasses, is already an enhancement of my body, right? It's something that I'm placing directly on my eyes, and it's enabling me to see better. So I think we'll see more of those kind of technologies in the future. And of course, we have to make a decision whether we want to use these technologies or not. So this leads to the question, for us as Christians, of course, what are some of the theological implications of the fourth industrial revolution, right? So you see my argument here, right? We have technological innovation that leads to social and economic change. And so for us as Christians, that means what are some of the theological implications? And so with that, I'm gonna read another section from my manuscript here. That is my first chapter is on autonomous vehicles. And so I start talking about self-driving cars. And then here I have this section where I have a theological evaluation of autonomous vehicles, where I write several of the technologies and developments associated with the fourth industrial revolution may be highly controversial, especially for Christians. And, we heard some of that just now. However, when it comes to self-driving vehicles, it seems to me that there's a lot to be said in favor of this new technology and the way it will transform people's lives. In the following, I highlight that self-driving cars will be, number one, safer, two, cleaner, and third, more efficient. Consequently, I believe it makes sense for us as believers to get behind this revolution in transportation and to support the transition to autonomous vehicles. And so for the first point, self-driving cars and trucks will be safer. Just this argument by itself should be enough to get Christians excited, considering that Christianity is a life-affirming faith. In the foundational texts of Genesis 1 and 2, we read how God creates life and an environment in which humans can flourish. In contrast to all other creatures, God the Father has life in himself. And just as with God is the fountain of life, so it is the Spirit who gives life. While Jesus is the life, right, in John 14:6, and came that we may have life and have it abundantly. God's life-bringing mission became necessary because death entered the world due to the fall, and we now live in an era of restoration. in an era of restoration, even though the final redemption of all things still lies in the future. Since we as Christians affirm that God gives life to all things, and that in particular, God is the one who gives life and breath to all people, we should always look for ways to save human lives and to do our best to avoid the unnecessary and untimely death of people. Now, if you want to see a place in which human lives are wasted on a daily basis, look no further than to the next street or highway, because deadly traffic accidents happen every day. In the past few years, traffic deaths in the United States have amounted to almost 40,000 casualties per year. Granted, gradual progress has been made due to new initiatives, regulations, and technologies, which is why this number is now down from a high in 1979, when 51,093 people were killed in fatal crashes. However, to put these numbers into perspective, in all of the wars combined that the United States has fought, over 1 million Americans have been killed. But since the introduction of the T model in 1913, over 2.5 million have lost their lives in traffic accidents. That's just in the United States alone. Most of these deaths are due to human error, with distracted driving, drunk driving, and speeding being the most common factors why human drivers cause accidents. By contrast, a fully autonomous car is 100% alert at all times, consistently follows traffic regulations, and is not affected by emotional outbursts, such as road rage. The point with regards to safety is clear. The AI-driven car is vastly superior to any human driver, which is why it can be anticipated that traffic casualties could be reduced by 90% or more once autonomous vehicles become the norm. Some 40,000 deaths per year versus around 4,000 deaths, the choice should be obvious. In addition to thousands of deaths, car-based transportation, as it is set up in the United States today, also leads to millions of serious injuries each year. There are over 6 million accidents in a typical year, and many of these cause injuries, sometimes severe injuries, such as people losing limbs, losing their eyes, or becoming paralyzed. It seems that we as a society are paralyzed when it comes to addressing these issues. Somehow we have accepted that such carnage is the price we pay for being able to drive wherever we want, whenever we want. In this context, let us also remember that there are massive economic interests behind the car industry, including the industries that specialize on when things go wrong. As the technology consultant Michael McGrath points out in his book, Autonomous Vehicles, Opportunities, Strategies, and Disruptions, it's important to acknowledge that there are many companies, organizations, and people who benefit from auto accidents. This includes many law firms and trial lawyers, insurance companies, courts, auto repair businesses, etc. A significant reduction in accidents will affect them. While it's disappointing, their organizations are lobbying to postpone autonomous vehicles to delay this benefit to society. Consequently, unmasking these special interests and fighting for a new approach to transportation could become an important justice issue for Christians in the coming decades. While the examples I gave above mostly focus on the United States, traffic fatalities are a truly global problem. As the World Health Organization highlights, approximately 1.35 million people die each year as a result of road traffic crashes. That is to say, every single day, almost 3,700 people are killed in incidents worldwide involving motorized vehicles. Tragically, more than half of these fatalities occur among the most vulnerable road users. They may not even have a car. Traffic participants like pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. In addition, worldwide, 93% of traffic deaths occur in low and middle income countries, which is a disproportionately high number considering that these countries only account for 60% of the world's vehicles. So severe is this problem that road accidents are the leading cause of death for children and young people 5 to 29 years of age. These numbers are tragic, revealing a deeply flawed and unjust system. But things do not have to remain this way. Increasingly, we have the technology at our disposal to change things. Some may not like the disruptions that such a move will entail, but we as Christians should stand up for the protection of human life and therefore be proactive in working towards a future in which safer vehicles and traffic systems will become the new norm. Yeah, so that's a little example of what a reflection could look like. And so I'm gonna now end with 5 areas that we could think about and with questions, and then we can lead to discussions, and I'll also look at the chat. So one question is, with this picture here of some kind of virtual reality experience, right? What steps should mission agencies and churches be taking to use AI and VR to present their message? So again, I understand that maybe a first reaction would be, oh, we don't need to use AI to present our message. We don't need virtual reality to present our message. But again, I want to remind ourselves that, you know, maybe 30 years ago or so, churches were also thinking they wouldn't need a website, or they wouldn't need a video conference system. And now, especially in the age of COVID, we all agree we do need Zoom or some other video conference system. So similarly, I think we need to start thinking about whether we'll be ready to present the gospel or present our churches in a virtual reality environment. Different set of questions, of course, related to what are the ethical implications of genetic engineering, right? Whether that happens at babies, right? What sometimes is called designer babies, or whether that happens with human beings who are already alive. Again, I understand it's relatively easy to critique that and to say that, oh no, we must not do that. We must not play with the building blocks of life, because then we would be playing God. And you know, and I respect that view, but on the other hand, we also have the example of Jesus of having a ministry of healing. And if diseases can be healed through advances in medicine that before could not be healed, you know, I think it's going to create some important questions for us as Christians. Another question would be, how will warfare change through the use of autonomous weapon systems, right? Which sometimes is called AWS in the context also of the 4th Industrial Revolution. And of course, we know already that drones are a common way of waging war today, but at the moment, it's still that the drone is programmed by a human being, and not only programmed, but also directed by a human being. But through artificial intelligence, at some point, drones could be capable of identifying their targets and then also making a decision whether they want to eliminate the target or not. And again, I understand the first reaction might be, no, this is horrible. It always needs to be a human being who makes the final decision. But what if after many years of testing, it becomes clear that AI does a better job and makes less mistakes in engaging deadly weapons compared to human soldiers? Then what would be the ethical implications of that? You know, similar to the car, I think we're going to see 20 years from now or so that AI-driven vehicles will be vastly safer than humans driving their vehicles. And then the question becomes, is it still ethical to drive? Another question would be, you know, what happens to our jobs? What kind of jobs will be left for humans as robots and AI systems become more and more capable? So again, the idea is if through robotics, any kind of physical task can be done by a robot, and if through AI, most intellectual tasks can be fulfilled by a computer program, then what kind of tasks remain for us to do? And what does it mean to be a human being? What makes us truly unique and different from any kind of machine, whether they have physical or cognitive capabilities? And another question would be, and with this one I close, why or why not should humans become a multiplanetary species? So, you know, at first we might think that obviously God gave the earth to human beings, that we have no business going to other planets. But again, I think it's worth thinking about it theologically and ask ourselves, when the Bible talks about the heaven and the earth, right, that maybe we should start thinking about that as heaven, not so much like the sky and where the stars are, but heaven is the place where God lives, you know, where his throne is set up and where the angels surround his throne. And that earth in the Bible, in the language of the Bible, could maybe relate more to the physical space that we are in, that humans could inhabit, right? And that could include other planets, and maybe that is part of God's plan for us, that we would be living on other planets besides planet Earth. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm glad we still have time for discussion. And I know there's things in the chat, so I'm going to start reading those. And I also just want to highlight that I understand that this is a lot and we won't be able to get to everything today, but I'm happy to stay in conversation with all of you. And so here's my email. It's my first and my last name, Daniel Topf. So Daniel, like in the Bible, and Topf as in TOPF @fuller.edu. So that's my email for academic stuff that I still use from Fuller, where I studied. And with that, I'm gonna stop sharing to also be able to see the chat. And I was talking to Joe before about doing breakup groups, but I think for now, Joe, if we can stay the way we are, because I see there's already a lot of interest, and maybe we won't have time for the breakup groups, and that's fine. So I just want to be, I appreciate that people were interacting with this on the chat. So I just want to read the chat first and be aware of that. And then maybe we can also have audio coming in. But let me start with the chat. So Phil is writing, who would have thought things would have progressed as fast as they have in the past? Yeah, look how fast computers were able to defeat Go. Never thought, not self-conscious yet. Never thought pretty fast like with cars. True, I have an implanted lens in one eye from cataract surgery. So that's a reflection. Katie writes, in this new world, moral issues are especially challenging. What or who gets to decide what constitutes better, smarter, more effective? The problem of technocracy is already rearing its ugly head. As a person who works with people with disabilities, both physical and intellectual, I'm concerned about the future stages of those that new mindset might consider to be defective or inferior. Then Bob, I think you mean the Model T. Second, I really like driving. I would hate to give up driving. Yes, I hear you. But if I can just make a quick comment on this one, I think part of it is also what kind of driving, right? Like if you live in Los Angeles and you have your daily commute through the traffic there, that's not a very attractive way of driving. What we think when we like driving, it's usually more like if we are on a scenic road somewhere. And again, if we drive somewhere in nature where there are few other cars, there is also less of a risk for traffic accidents. So maybe in 20 years from now, the driving we don't want to do will be done by machines, but we'll still be able to drive in beautiful places, hopefully. Then virtual reality of Norma writes, imagine virtual reality to listen to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Yes, that could be interesting. And Phil, when it was about warfare, said, okay, we have autonomous weapon systems, plus also enhanced soldiers as humans. Bob Wright, my first wife and two of my children might be alive today if there was genetic engineering that could have prevented or cured Huntington's disease. Yes, I think that's an excellent example. Phil, could we add the smell of the lilies of the field like Soaring Ride in California Adventure? Many science fiction book ideas have become reality. Arthur Clarke dreamed up the satellite, for example, Clarke with an E. Why not go to other planets? Other books talk about terraforming planets. Katie, we may have to become multiplanetary if we cannot arrest the progression of degradation of our current earthly home. Yes, that's a thought. There might also be a meteorite that comes too close and causes great damage. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Linda, in San Diego, we are putting in public transportation and bikes and taxing cars to pay for it. We expect folks to walk more to get to their social places. Bernie, God created us and animals to live on planet Earth and to multiply. Yes, I agree. I guess one question is, what if we continue to multiply and, if the population becomes much, much bigger, would that be maybe a reason to also go to another planet? So yeah, I appreciate the comments. If anybody wants to, maybe go back to something they wrote and emphasize it again, or maybe come in by audio and reflect on anything that I said or anything that anybody said in the chat, then yes, please feel free to unmute yourself and we'll be happy to hear from you.
I think one thing that we know from history and the history of technology is you can't stop it. It's the genie that's out of the bottle. So all of these things we're going to have. So it's not a question really of whether we want them or not. It really is a question of how we're going to change or to react or to adapt or whatever to every one of these. And as you said several times, Daniel, we don't know. I mean, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the world was very, very, very different. And 40 years from now, I'm sure it will be very different again. I like the idea of always considering the theological impact. And in thinking of that, I'm thinking back to poor old Galileo. And that wasn't really a technological thing, except his telescope, obviously. And so theology has to keep up with technology in a way that allows us all to both remain sane and, for that matter, Christian.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Alfred. And I do want to come back to that point where the person wrote about, people with disabilities, whether physical or cognitive. I do think that, the dignity of human life is one of the things, one of the strengths, right? The emphasis on the Imago Dei, right? That we are all created in the image of God. I think it's one of the strengths that the human beings can bring to this discussion, to a society that maybe will become more inhuman over time, or will just put a lot of emphasis on performance. Again, on the more positive note, I also want to say, I think if we come to the point that there are certain AIs who are vastly superior to human intelligence, that maybe we will all become more humble. Like at the moment, if somebody has an IQ of, I don't know, 135 or something, we think that's very impressive, and we look down on a person maybe that has an IQ of 65. But if in the future we have machines that have an equivalent IQ of 2,000 or 3,000, we will say, compared to that, let's just say we are doing all right, and maybe there will be less of an emphasis on the intellectual capabilities of human beings, which is a big emphasis in our society today, right? We value education. Most people who are highly paid, like doctors, lawyers, consultants, they have certain intellectual capacities, and maybe those intellectual capacities will be less important in the future because machines can do it much better. Can I ask again, for those who are not sharing, like Norman Wilson, you are not muted. I'm not sure if that noise is coming from you, but we do have a bit too much background noise here. So that would be great. But I want to also respect what we have on the chat. Phil is saying, thank you, Daniel. I hope to be in touch soon. Amen to that. We look forward to that. Aaron writes, a human has consciousness and conscience. A human has needs for survival, which contribute to the ability to regret, for instance, being a person who uses drones to kill people in warfare. The drone does not care. And then Jim says, question of access and ownership of technology and universal access. Yeah, if I can say something about the warfare piece, that is true. But again, it works in both ways, right? So we could say that a human being, because they can regret killing another human beings, that maybe they will hold back. But on the other hand, it's also true that throughout the history of war, many human beings have killed other human beings. And again, I understand from a pacifist point of view, you might even argue that they should never kill the human beings. But within the logic of warfare, within the logic of the Geneva Convention, for example, nations generally agree that we must not kill prisoners of war, right? That once somebody has surrendered and has dropped their weapons, it's unethically to kill them. In the history of warfare, that has always happened. Why? Well, precisely because we have only a conscience, but we have emotion. And soldiers get angry and soldiers get frustrated, and they might be doing things that they would usually not be doing, or that a machine might not be doing. A machine might be programmed to, for example, never kill a person, and then they never do it. But a human being does sometimes do it. The same goes with rape, right? Throughout the human history of warfare, the rape of women has been used also as a weapon of war. And again, you could argue that machines would be more ethical in that they would not rape women. So that's a thought there. And then Jim also says, Mexican philosopher Paulo Freire suggested that if technology were distributed equally, each person in the world could have a bicycle. Yeah, no, I think that's a great observation. And again, especially on the global scale, I mean, I know that even in the United States, we talk about the digital divide, right? We talk about individuals or maybe communities that don't really have access to the internet, or at least not fast internet, and that puts them at a disadvantage. That's of course even more so true if you look on a global scale, right, where we still have hundreds of millions of people who don't have access to electricity, and certainly not to high-speed internet, and so the danger is that those countries or those communities are being left behind because they don't have access to these opportunities. So yeah, I think that is another big topic for us to think about.
The whole issue of ownership of technology too is what leads us to the problems we have with, say, the cost of drugs today, where somebody has a technology and that other people need, and because it's scarce, they can charge outrageous amounts of money for it. I think anytime you have unequal technologies, you're going to have abuse of it. Which is not to say, I'm not saying that everybody should have a bicycle exactly, but it's a huge problem because a lot of this technology is going to be extremely expensive and distributed very unfairly.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great observation. Everything that goes with intellectual property rights, and Jim, as you rightly point out, especially when it comes to medication, very quickly becomes a highly ethical question. Now I have to think that this book that I'm planning to write, and maybe even the discussion today, what as you saw on the PowerPoint slides today, I'm leaning more towards the optimistic end of the discussion, where I'm generally more excited maybe about what these new technologies could offer, at least potentially. And so for example, on this point, I want to say that yes, I agree that some of those technologies will be extremely expensive, right? Like the next generation of computers, like quantum computers, and things like the space technologies. But on the other hand, I think what we have seen is that when it comes, I've come at the end of the third industrial revolution, like what came with the internet, and applications like Google and email and those kind of things. There we now have the phenomenon that we have a good product that is offered for free, right? Like you have free information on the internet, which of course it's not directly free in the sense that, we look at ads and then we click on them and then we buy things, but you don't have to pay. You don't have like a monthly fee that you have to pay. And previously that simply was not the case. If you look at the products of the first and the second industrial revolution, whether it's a physical product like a washing machine, or even then with the computer age, even when you had some kind of subscription or for television, for example, right? If you want cable TV, if you want the information that comes through cable TV, you need to pay $25 a month or whatever. And now, with YouTube, you have much more information available than cable TV. And, anybody in the world who has internet and electricity can watch it for free or by watching ads, but without paying money is my point. So I think it's again both. I think there are some opportunities that these technologies will actually be, promoting quality in the sense that people will have access to a lot of things without having to pay for them. Jim, yes, it's free. The learners are getting something from our participation, big data to sell. No, I agree, but I'm just thinking about, say, for example, a university student in Nigeria who basically, doesn't have any money, maybe they're studying on a scholarship, but they don't have any disposable income. If they want to have cable TV or if they want to buy books, they would have to buy them, need at least $20, $50, $100 a month, which they don't have. Now, if they go on YouTube, they can access this information without paying for it. And yes, they they make their data available, and that is an ethical question. You know, how much of our data do we want to make available? Like, for example, my wife and I, we are using this Geico app now for our car insurance, where Geico knows where we are driving and how we are driving, and Geico gives us a driver's score. And you know, the reason we're doing it, because then the amount that we have to pay in car insurance is less. But of course, we're giving up privacy. I recognize that. But if you're just talking about the monetary dimension, I think there is an incentive, and you know, different people will make different decisions about it.
And I think one of the things we're seeing now too with companies like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, is that they are using strategies to enhance their problems, their profit, which have very bad social implications. And I mean, really adding to the sickness that our country is experiencing and the world is experiencing, because they want to sell advertising, they want to push more views in front of people, and the way they entice them to go from one page to another page is
Right.
can be very sick.
Right. No, I agree. I think one of the discussions that we have to have, and yeah, I hope that the church can be part of that, is, you know, if things are for free in terms of money that you don't have to pay, what other price are you paying, right? And yeah, I agree with Facebook and YouTube and all the algorithms that, you know, for example, if you have a certain political opinion, they push you further down and push you more towards an extreme in that political opinion. In that sense, you know, maybe we are not paying money for YouTube and Facebook, but we're paying with our democracy. You know, maybe our democracy is in danger because of these profit-driven algorithms, and maybe we should at some point say this is a price we're not willing to pay.
Yeah.
But getting back to my point earlier, I mean, this is true of every technology that's come along. It was true of Gutenberg and the printing press. You know, your point was well taken, although I think so was Jim's. But your point was well taken, is that as technology catches on, it becomes cheaper and more widespread. 20, 30 years ago, we had to go to a library to get most of the things that any place in the world we could get any time of day or night on the internet. And it's a genie that's out of the bottle. So it's going to be continuous. It always has been continuous. It just feels more difficult, particularly with advertising, as Jim points out. But that was true, of course, in the early newspapers. I mean, the penny press and all, you know, the yellow press. I mean, we can find it in every age and every time. It's a matter of how we handle it, and regulation is always way behind. So I like your idea of thinking about what Christians and theologians should be thinking about it, philosophers should be thinking about it, because it's going to be there. It's a question of what we do with it and how we do with it.
Yeah, no, I like what you're saying, that, you know, regulators like politicians and our parliaments and stuff, right? They tend to be behind because those technological developments happen very quickly. I think that's true. The church in general also has a tendency to be a little bit behind, right? We tend to be more reactive rather than proactive, and that's actually part of my purpose for this topic tonight, is to invite us to be more proactive about these things. Now, I want to go back to the chat. Bob says, regarding Geico, also with more information you provide, insurance companies could use that against you in court if you have an accident. They could use your information to establish that you are a bad driver. Oh my, they could. So yeah, I agree. There's always two sides to the story, I guess. But again, you know, I think the interesting thing, if we look a little bit further down, like 20 years from now, I think car insurance will work very differently anyway, because we'll mostly have self-driving cars. And Oren says, regarding social media, presumably unintentionally has accelerated divisions that lead to, for instance, the January 6th attack on the Capitol and atrocities throughout the world, including genocides. I fear that, as always, technologies outpace the ability for humans to cope with them. Yes, I agree. There's always been technologies that kind of have, you know, overwhelmed us, whether as a society you know, like with nuclear weapons, for example, as individuals, like, you know, individuals who can't live without checking their social media accounts all the time. Yeah, I think that's true. And again, you know, I wanna kind of end on a positive note, or with an optimistic angle for us as the church, right? And for us as Christians, I think those create opportunities to help people to find greater wholeness and greater shalom, you know, in the way they live their lives. So I think one of the big things that we can offer as the church is to proclaim the concept of the Sabbath, right? To lead people to a point where, even though their social media accounts and all this interesting information on the internet and their email from work and everything is available 24/7, but to come to a point where we say, but we consciously take a break from all technology one day a week, you know, and maybe also 1 week a year, kind of like a retreat that we do, where we detox from technology, and you know, and maybe we can set an example in our own lives, in our families, towards our children, if we have children, right? And maybe also on a bigger scale by offering retreat centers, you know, where people can come. Maybe, you know, maybe offer a kind of retreat where you have to submit your smartphone when you check in, and as long as you're there somewhere in the cabins in the woods, you won't have any devices that are connected to the internet for 1 week or for 10 days. So yeah, I think those are things for us to think about. And, you know, we accept, just as we accept the reality of work, right? The reality of work has always been their human history, but God said, enough if you work 6 days a week and 1 day you can rest, right? Which was revolutionary in those days, because of course, especially for enslaved people, the idea was, of course, my slaves are going to work all the time. And God said, no, everybody gets to rest. So similarly with technology that's available all the time, you know, we maybe could say, okay, for the most part, 6 days a week, we accept the reality of technology, use it, but then we also have a break 1 day a week.
Yeah, it seems like we have a way to reach into people's homes and talk with people that are having problems, that we could have, like the Sunday school teacher could check in with their students if they know they're going through rough times, that email or video chatting, or there's so many people that are shut in and not doing good, that that we can make more contact with them, that I think we're going to become closer. People, it's been proven that prayer and meditation makes our brains better. And I think we need social interaction. I think the computers are a great way towards making that happen and making us more cohesive as a group. It's a good conversation for each church to have.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. I'm going to the chat again, Bob. Thank you for raising some very important issues for us. Thank you for calling us to think. Yes, I agree. I know I haven't really provided many answers, but that was the main idea, to get us started in this conversation. Joe, how are we doing in terms of overall time management? I think we're at 1 hour 15. Is that true?
Yeah, so we would be at the end of our time, you know, so it'd be flexible if you wanted to do a few closing remarks or thoughts like that. And like I was saying, people can connect back with you. And if somebody didn't get any of that information, they can always send me an email at front desk and I can get it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. No, I don't have any closing remarks. Like I said, I know I've been raising some questions and I don't necessarily have the answers, but I'm happy that we started this conversation today, and I look forward to continuing it.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Karen.
And I'll see you all tomorrow, I guess. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Daniel. That was really very interesting.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Very interesting.
Wonderful.
And Joe, you're gonna,
Thank
this
you.
all is gonna be on the website, right? You're muted.
You're muted, Joe.
About a week after the business meeting.
Yeah, and you're also gonna send us evaluation forms in a few minutes.
Yeah, about 8 o'clock, you'll get an evaluation form. And those are helpful both to the presenter and to the planners for next year.
You know, Joe, it does seem like there was something wrong here. I mean, Daniel was right. There is this constant background noise, and yet it seemed like everybody was muted. Maybe there's something, some glitch in the system.
It could be, and sometimes whoever the speaker is, sometimes the, it could be like if Daniel was using earbuds instead of listening on a speaker, that might have been part of it.
But the truth is, everybody wasn't muted.
Oh, that's true? Oh,
There
okay.
were several people that were not muted.
Yeah, I looked at the participant list and I saw that usually there were like 2 or 3 people who were not muted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I frequently muted those people and the echo still happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's an echo right now.
Yeah. And there's people not muted right now.
That's true.
Muchas gracias, Daniel.
I just muted myself and I could still see some of the, hear some of those noises. David, sí. Gracias a usted.
Yes,
Guys, thanks so much. Have a good night, guys.
That's the problem with technology is that if we don't use it right, then it still doesn't work.
Yeah, we need the technology there.
I mean, we just proved it.
Yeah. We have a takeaway for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
See you mañana.
Hasta mañana.